Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more Entitled Karen stories. In this video, an entitled Karen trespassed on my off-grid property and held me at gunpoint, claiming that I am a criminal who is trespassing on the land despite her being the actual trespasser. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Never Mess with a Farmer. So I grew up on a dairy farm, struggling every day 365 to help my family live. About 10 years in, the farmer's land next to us has a single house built onto a small plot near the irrigation riser, and a younger family from the city moves in for a quiet life in the country. So over the next year, the cops are at our place a dozen times about smell complaints, noise complaints, the work started at 5 AM, tractors and all, and other complaints about anything this family could think of, basically trying to get us shut down for existing outside the bounds of their imagined country life. In the winter, my dad would drive our tractor round to all the neighbors' houses on our mile and dig the snow out of their driveways so they could drive to work, which was a costly and time-consuming endeavor, but one of the main things a farmer can do to gain praise and feel good every day. Well, about 3 weeks into winter, this guy from the new house shows up at our door asking us to not do this to his driveway so early in the morning because it was waking him up. My dad explained that he had to do it at 5 AM because he did it before he started the other chores that took hours of his time. The neighbor insisted that he do it later or not at all. Well, that was the last time my dad did his driveway, and it turns out you have to wake up at about 5 AM to use your snowblower to dig out your own car if you want to get to work on time. And yeah, honestly guys, I don't understand this. Clearly OP's dad did a very good deed here, and who in their right mind would complain about someone doing this? You must clearly be on something to refuse OP's dad's services and then even talk crap about him. Anyway, the next one is titled, I built an off-grid cabin in the woods in 80 days. So about 6 months ago, I moved from where I was born and raised, Chicago, to Southeast Asia. I know, quite the move. So I was basically tired with my life and had saved enough to make the trip and decided to just go for it. I was never planning on going out there to be self-sufficient, but a couple of months before my moving date, I stumbled upon a whole community of people who have built their own homesteads and live off of the land. I was mesmerized by it all. It seemed so peaceful and fulfilling, of course in the long run also cheaper and economical. I had specifically seen these 80-day building challenges before going around and decided that I would give it a shot. I bought the plot of land ahead of time, of course, along with a couple months rent and a nearby flat while I was building. The plot of land is in a lovely area, amazing views from one side, a forest on the other, and yet still fairly well connected to the rest of the area. For the first week, I spent my time mapping out my land and testing the areas and soil for any evidence of a potential sinkhole or things that would inhibit my building. I bought and gathered materials from local markets, even getting some tips on the way. Most people were intrigued by my project and would come by every once in a while for a chat. It was lovely. Honestly, it's a lovely community over here. Anyway, for the next weeks, I would map out the base layer of everything and build. That was pretty much all I did for those 2.5 months. By the end of the 80 days, I had successfully built a lovely little myself to live in, a well for my water, as well as some filtering systems. I had also made a small pen for me to raise a few chickens in. A local farmer sold me some for a good price. I built other little small pens for some crops, vegetables and some fruits, and I bought a few half-grown apple trees to have my own little orchard in the back near the forest. I also built a fence around my property, nothing too crazy, just something which outlined my ownings. The main reason for the fence was the path I noticed when I first saw my land. The last owners did not really visit the land, and so they had not noticed or did not care that people were using it as a way to get through. I guess there's no harm in this, and it did mean that I made a good few friends, people who would come to their usual route and get shocked by my new home and stay for a chat. Before I tell you about a certain visitor, I would like to clarify that this property is certainly mine. I have the rights and ownership to these specific coordinates. Most people could probably gather that from the I own this land, but clearly, and as you will come to find out, that does not include everyone. What on earth is this? I heard being screamed outside of my cabin one afternoon, a few weeks after my building process was relatively completed. I walked outside and saw another hiker come across my fence. "Hey," I said as I went over. I said, "What is this?" The woman repeated, "This is my home. I've bought this land and it just so happened to be over this path that people have trampled in over time. Do you walk here often?" I asked, assuming she would understand like everyone else and begin having a friendly conversation. I was wrong though. Yes, I do walk here often. I've been walking this path for decades. You will have to move. She crossed her arms. I'm sorry, but I cannot move. I assure you, I own this land. How come I haven't seen you before? I've been building here for a while. I asked, not liking the way this interaction was headed. I've been away and don't be nosy, she retorted, sticking her finger in my chest. You're violating my territory. Your territory? Ma'am, I own this land. Don't you dare to ma'am me. You are trespassing on the land that I have the rights to. I'm not trespassing because I own this land. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Okay, why do you think you have the rights to this land? Maybe there's some misunderstanding here. There's no misunderstanding. I own this land because I've been walking it for decades. Enough said. That's not how land and property ownership works. I sighed again. I legally own this land. I see no proof, she exclaimed, stomping her foot. Let me go and get the paperwork then, I replied and walked back over to my cabin. After hunting around my cabin for the paperwork, I opened the door to find the woman standing right outside, meaning she climbed over the fence because the gate is locked. As I've explained, the fence is not very high at all and is more just so people are aware where my property starts. However, the principle is still there that she climbed over. Do you mind not climbing into my property? I asked. It's not your land, she exclaimed and ripped the paper out of my hands. She scanned over the paperwork, mumbling to herself while she shook her head. She shoved the papers into her pocket. You cannot keep those, I stated, extending my hand out. I can do if they are fraudulent documents of this land. Well, they are not fraudulent. Listen, just give them back and get off my land. I reached forward and attempted to reach into her pocket, which, thinking back, was perhaps not the best move, but anyway, before I could get there, she let out a blood-curdling scream and jumped back, reaching into her other pocket and pulling out a gun. Yes, a gun. I have no idea where she was hiding that, but one thing I know is that in this area they are certainly illegal. Whoa, okay, calm down, I said with my hands up, realizing that this woman was clearly not stable and might actually shoot me. She was shaking for a solid minute before she spoke. Get off my land and take all of this junk with you. How about you put that gun down and we can have a good chat about this. Maybe we can call us a property surveyor, you know, just so I know that the land is definitely yours. Don't try to trick me. You're just going to, I don't know, just leave. I was beyond scared at this point. I don't know a whole lot about guns, but this one looked real, too real. I'm defending my rights, she explained, waving the gun at my face. This is my land, and you're gonna leave. Okay, you're right, I stated, trying to remain calm, even though I was shaking beyond belief. This is when I will point out that although I'm living off-grid, I still have a phone, mainly because I'm in a brand new country, and the world is not all sunshine and rainbows, just like I learned today. I will leave, I will pack up everything and go, I stated, slowly lowering my hands. Good, she sighed, keeping the gun held high. What do you want me to do with all of the materials? I asked, hoping to distract her while I slowly reached into my pocket to phone the police. While she was thinking of some strange way to explain what to do with all of my stuff, I dialed the local police number, or at least hoped that's what I was doing. Luckily I was, as I faintly felt my phone buzzing while it was ringing, and then very quietly heard an operator on the other end. Knowing that they were listening, I decided to get a small reaction out of the woman. Would you mind lowering the gun now? I asked. You have no right to tell me to do such a thing. I can hold a gun and shoot whoever I want on my own land, she exclaimed, shooting one shot into the air. Fear flooded through me once more, but this time I knew at least someone would be coming, and came they did. It did not take long at all for the police officers to arrive, and I don't think I've ever been more thankful to see cars pulling up to these fields. The woman started running, jumping over the fence, well trying to, and then falling into the grass. An officer ran over and yanked her up off the ground while she wailed. Are you okay? Any injuries? The other officer asked as I walked over. No, I'm okay, I replied, the shock still lacing through my veins. Would you like to press charges? They asked. Yes, of course I would. I'll be pressing for emotional damage as well. I want her arrested, charged with whatever you can do. All I remember was sounding fairly rash with my comments. I think it was the shock, but at the same time I'm certainly glad that I said what I did. The police took me and the woman to the station in separate cars. She was in the front and I could see the car swerve ever so slightly as she banged against the sides. When we arrived at the station, I gave my statement and explained everything that had happened leading up to the moment the gun was pulled, and including when she shot her gun into the air. While we were in the station, the police checked over my paperwork that they got out of the woman's pocket, confirming that I was the owner. This sent said woman into another fit of rage where she attempted to punch an officer in the face, which did not work considering the handcuffs. I was still present while she was being prosecuted, and boy was it satisfying. She basically was arrested for trespassing, aggravated assault, and brandishing a firearm. "You cannot do this, those are my lands," the woman yelled, crying and screaming, kicking her feet like a child. "You're not the owner of those lands. You cannot just assault people," the officer replied. She ended up behind bars for her crimes and was also ordered to pay a fine to me for emotional distress. Furthermore, I pressed for a restraining order because I didn't want this maniac coming anywhere near me anymore in the future. While we were at this court, it was explained to her once more that I owned the property and that she had no rights to it just because she happened to walk over it for her daily hikes or whatever in the past. She kicked up another fuss and got removed from the courthouse, adding some more punishments to her sentence. In short, some people are crazy. I certainly am liking this lifestyle of living off-grid though. Other than this bizarre situation, my life has been so much more stress-free, and it's so satisfying knowing that I built everything from the ground up. And the next one is titled, "The city wanted us to get rid of native grass, so we built an urban wetlands." This all goes back to the summer of 2021. I started working as a biologist at an urban farm, planning on constructing polyculture systems to research food production. I developed a plan for noxious weed control and started to construct the systems over the course of 2 years. During this time, we had some back and forth with the city council who didn't understand the nature of our agriculturally zoned property. After several meetings and lots of work over 2 years, we had finally made a lot of progress and reached an agreement with the city by the summer of 2023. Part of the agreement was to mow ditches and the small yard of our property's farmhouse. I'll remind you, the property is zoned as agriculture, so we have no obligation to follow residential ordinances. About halfway through the summer, at the end of July, the city came onto our property and mowed the entire native pasture and what was soon to be an orchard of already planted baby trees. When we talked to them, they noted ordinances against tall grass and stated noxious weed laws as a justification. The latter of which is ironic because they interrupted our system of invasive plant control by mowing in a time when we should not have been spraying bioherbicide. So now, in order to remove all the invasive plants from my property and comply with all the ordinances, none of which have anything to do with water, I have created a massive urban wetlands. It is huge, it is beautiful, it is wet, it's compliant to every law and ordinance. Also, it is mine, and the city mayor, who lives next door to my farm, can enjoy it just as much as I enjoy living 5 miles away. So now I have a wetlands to research instead of a prairie, and I love it. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I've never had any troubles with my neighborhood from the day I first moved in with my family up until 5 years later when the old lady who lived next door sadly passed away. It took a while given how old the house was, but eventually someone bought it and moved in. The man who moved in looked to be around the same age as me and did not seem to bring many belongings with him. When I went over after a couple of weeks, giving him enough time to settle in, he greeted me with what I can only describe as the absolute opposite of friendliness. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said in an attempt to cheer up his sour face. For someone who had just moved into a new home, he certainly didn't look the most thrilled. "Thanks," he replied grudgingly, making no attempt to further the conversation and staring at me like I was some out-of-space life form. "Okay, well, if you ever need anything," I began before getting the door shut in my face. After that cheery interaction, I went back home to carry on doing some tasks around the house. Not 5 minutes later did I hear the sound of a loud engine starting up outside. Glancing out the window, I spotted my new cheery neighbor revving off in his big van with "construction handyman" plastered on the side. I guess that explained his work. I watched for a moment as he sped off, leaving horrible dirt marks in his wake, which I knew he would not be planning to sort out. He came back a couple hours later, and on the way to his driveway, he mounted the side of mine and left even more horrible marks. These ones looked to be wet concrete that I knew the rain would not wash away. Angrily and already annoyed at my new neighbor, I stormed out of my house and straight over to his, banging on the door with my fist. "Sir, can you please refrain from driving over my driveway next time you come home?" I spoke as calmly as possible once he had opened the door. He smirked at me in a way which made my blood boil and replied, "Your driveway?" before once more shutting the door in my face. I stood there for a few seconds before realizing that I probably looked stupid and stormed back over to my house, grabbing some cleaning supplies and coming back out to clean up the concrete before it set. When my husband came home later, I barely gave him a second to walk in the door before telling him all about our lovely new neighbor and what a great first impression he made. He assured me that the next time there was an issue, he would go over and deal with it, which worked at calming me down for the remainder of the evening. My calm did not last long, however, as in the middle of the night, I heard the sound of the van engine and dreaded seeing what damage it had done. At the time, I decided to wait until morning to see the state of my driveway, as I knew my temper was already hanging by a thread and I didn't want to start an argument so late at night. Once morning arrived, I had almost forgotten about what I had heard last night, and only once I was making my morning coffee and saw what was outside did I remember. There was no concrete marks or dirt on the driveway. That much was a relief. However, what I failed to look past was the fact that my neighbor had decided that my driveway was now his new parking spot. My husband came up beside me and shared an equally sour expression. Not bothering to change out of my robe or finish my coffee, I stormed out of the house once more with my husband in tow. He knocked on my neighbor's door with 3 loud thuds, and together we waited for the door to be opened. What was all we got from the man once the door had opened? Did he really have no clue as to what we were here for? Why have you parked your van on our driveway? I understand that you and my wife might not have gotten off on the right foot, but this is just childish. My husband responded calmly. It's not your driveway, was all we got back from the man. What do you mean it's not our driveway? Of course it is, we have lived here for years. My husband was beginning to lose the calm mask he put up. My house description says it comes with a driveway, and the patch of land outside my house is clearly not what anyone would consider a driveway, so I probably own the land outside of yours. The man shrugged as if what he was saying was completely understandable. First of all, you will have seen the driveway before you bought the house, I'm sure, so you must have known the one you were getting was small. Secondly, why on earth would your driveway be in front of another house? I replied, cutting off my husband just before he started to speak. I've had enough of this. I bought that land, the man snarked, slamming the door in our faces, something he clearly had a habit for. Me and my husband shared an angry glance before knocking on once more, not finished with our conversation. After a while of no answer, we decided to head home and hope for the best. Over the course of the next week, every single day the man would park his van in our driveway, most of the time blocking the garage, which meant we struggled to get out in our own cars for the day. On the 5th day of us arguing with the neighbor, we decided we had enough and called a towing company to tow away his van. After showing proof that the van was parked on private property, it was towed away and put in an impound garage downtown. Our neighbor came storming over the second he saw his van was gone. "What have you done?" he fumed, a vein was pulsing on his head. "Well, we got rid of something that was on our property," I replied with a shrug, as if I didn't know what he was on about. "It's not your property, that's my driveway. Now where's my van?" The man at this point was stood not even a foot away from me. "Oh yes, your van, sorry, I forgot about that," I replied with a smile, handing him the letter the towing company had given me, which detailed where the van was and how much it would cost to get it out. "You're going to pay for this," the man seethed before walking away, crumpling the paper in his hand. I thought nothing of it, assuming it was nothing more than an empty threat, and went inside with a satisfied grin on my face. 2 days later, me, my husband and our daughter drove away from our home to go on a holiday, which we had been planning for a while. The trip was lovely, nothing but a week of expensive meals and beachy afternoons. However, on the way back home, I started to get this horrible gut feeling that something was wrong. My suspicions were confirmed when I came home to see that we could not even get into our driveway with the mess that was made. Right in the middle of the driveway was a giant gaping hole with a cone that had "Construction Handyman" written on it. "How do you like my renovations?" a voice said from behind us once we got out of the car, which we had to park in the street. "Why have you done this?" I all but yelled at the man after giving my daughter the keys and telling her to go inside. I walked over to the hole, which seemed even bigger closer up. "To prove that this driveway is mine," he responded with a shrug. "That's it, I'm calling the police," I stated, but before I could pull the phone out of my pocket, the man grabbed my wrist and shoved me to the floor. Not thinking, I jumped to my feet and punched him square in the nose, successfully knocking him unconscious. My husband was on the phone to the police straight away, and they were here in a matter of minutes. By the time they arrived, my neighbor had woken up slightly and was trying to lie his way out of the situation. He was telling the police that we were framing him for something he did not do and that I assaulted him out of nowhere. The whole time I could not help but smirk as I waited for him to finish his speech. "Let's check the camera," I stated, relishing as his face fell. "We have a doorbell with a camera on our front door, which perfectly captured the man digging the hole and then provoking an attack." With more than enough evidence, I was able to press charges of $200,000, which covered the damages tenfold. He ended up behind bars for a long time and nobody missed him. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.